Capitalism doesn't fail when things go wrong. It fails when things go right. That sounds backwards, but it's the most honest description of how modern economies actually work. Wealth is not created gently. Progress does not accumulate politely. Capitalism advances by tearing down what already exists and replacing it with something new, whether society is ready or not. Factories replace craftsmen. Machines replace workers. Platforms replace entire industries. Cities rise, hollow out, and rise again somewhere else. And at every stage, value is created precisely because something else is destroyed. This is not a metaphor. It is a diagnosis, and the economist who named it understood something most people still resist. Instability is not a flaw of capitalism. It is the engine. Welcome to the Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide. Nothing is ever as simple as it looks. Joseph Schumpeter did not arrive at this conclusion from abstract theory. He lived inside collapse. Born in 1883 in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Schumpeter watched one of the most sophisticated political and economic systems of its time dissolve into chaos. He saw empires vanish, currencies implode, and social hierarchies evaporate almost overnight. He lived through World War I, hyperinflation, mass unemployment, and the violent birth of modern capitalism. This matters because Schumpeter was not writing from optimism or nostalgia. He did not believe markets were naturally stable, fair, or self-correcting in any comforting sense. And unlike Marx, he did not believe capitalism would collapse because it failed economically. He believed it would succeed and still destroy itself in the process. That made him dangerous to everyone. To socialists, because he believed capitalism was extraordinarily productive. To free market idealists, because he believed that same productivity was socially corrosive. To policymakers, because he rejected the idea that stability was the goal. Schumpeter didn't see capitalism as a machine that settles into balance. He saw it as a storm, system-violent, directional, and unstoppable. At the center of his thinking was one idea that would follow him forever: creative destruction. Today, the phrase is often used like a motivational slogan. Innovation destroys the old, creates the new deal with it. But that framing misses Schumpeter's actual meaning. Creative destruction is not about progress in general. It is about replacement. Capitalism does not grow by adding new layers on top of existing structures. It grows by rendering them obsolete. Entire ways of life disappear not because they were inefficient yesterday, but because something more powerful appeared today. This is why Schumpeter rejected the classical idea of competition as price rivalry. Focusing on prices misses the real battlefield entirely. The most important competition is not between similar firms offering slightly cheaper products. It is between different ways of organizing reality. Railroads did not compete with canals. They erased them. Automobiles did not compete with horse-drawn transport. They eliminated the ecosystem that supported it. Electricity did not negotiate with gaslighting. It replaced Italiano. This kind of competition does not lower margins gradually. It wipes out industries. Once you see capitalism this way, everything looks different. Markets stop looking like smooth curves and start looking like fault lines. Growth stops looking stable and starts looking episodic. Financial crises stop appearing as accidents and start looking like debris left behind after transformation. For Schumpeter, the real driver of this process was not consumers and not even markets themselves. It was the entrepreneur, not the shopkeeper, not the small business owner, but the figure willing to reorganize production in a way that breaks existing arrangements. Entrepreneurs introduce new products, new methods, new markets, new sources of supply, or entirely new forms of organization. And in doing so, they disrupt entire systems. This disruption requires funding. That's where Schumpeter's view of finance becomes critical. He saw banks not as active engines of transformation. Credit, in his view, was not about smoothing consumption or stabilizing markets. It was about redirecting resources away from the old and toward the new. Every major innovation wave is financed before it is justified. That means instability is baked in from the start. When credit flows toward innovation, it starves existing structures. Old firms lose access to capital. Workers tied to legacy industries lose bargaining power. Regions dependent on outdated systems decline, often permanently. And when innovation succeeds, It doesn't restore balance. It creates a new dominance that will eventually be challenged in turn. This is why Schumpeter saw economic cycles not as deviations from equilibrium, but as the natural rhythm of capitalism itself. Booms are creative destruction in motion. Busts are the system digesting what has just been destroyed. Nothing about this process is gentle. Here's where Schumpeter becomes uncomfortable even for people who admire capitalism. He believed capitalism's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness, by relentlessly destroying tradition, stability, and social structure. Capitalism erodes the very institutions that make it politically tolerable. Small communities dissolve. Careers become temporary. Skills expire, loyalty weakens. Patience disappears. Economic success undermines social cohesion. Schumpeter predicted that capitalism would eventually create a society wealthy enough to survive without its hands, cynical enough to reject it. Not because it failed to deliver prosperity, but because it delivered it in a way that felt destructive, disorienting, and unfair. This was not a moral argument. It was an institutional one. A system that constantly uproots lives must justify itself continuously. And eventually, justification wears thin. What Schumpeter described as slow historical waves. Modern capitalism compressed into decades, then years, then months. Innovation accelerated. Finance expanded. Creative destruction stopped being episodic and became continuous. Industries no longer dominate for generations. Entire business models now become obsolete within a single cycle. Technologies don't mature before they disrupt. They disrupt while still unfinished. Platforms don't compete with incumbents. They erase the need for them. A taxi company doesn't lose market share, the idea of owning a taxi collapses. Retail doesn't decline physical. Retail becomes optional. This is creative destruction at full speed, and finance amplifies it. Capital now moves globally, instantly, and at scale. It doesn't wait for society to adjust. It flows where returns appear and abandons whatever no longer fits the model. That's why modern booms feel different. Valuations rise ahead of profits. Narratives outrun cash flows. Entire sectors reorganize around expectations rather than outcomes. And when expectations shift, destruction arrives before creation. Schumpeter warned that capitalism's internal logic pushes toward financialization, toward abstract ownership, detached from production. As firms grow larger and innovation becomes institutionalized, the entrepreneur gives way to the corporation. Risk becomes bureaucratized. Decisions concentrate. Creative destruction stops looking heroic. It starts looking arbitrary. Jobs disappeared not because something better was invented, but because a spreadsheet changed assumptions. Cities hollow out, not because they failed, but because capital found higher returns elsewhere. Workers aren't replaced by innovation. They're bypassed by it. This is Schumpeter's darkest insight. Capitalism undermines the cultural foundations that protected not through poverty, but through instability. Not through failure, but through success. That feels chaotic and unjust. People don't rebel when systems don't work. They rebel when systems work but not for them. Rising inequality is not an external flaw. It is often the residue of creative destruction. Those positioned near innovation hubs accumulate wealth rapidly. Those tied to legacy systems experience decline even as GDP grows. Growth and dislocation coexist. That's why modern economic debates feel incoherent. One side points to innovation and productivity. The other points to insecurity and loss. Both are describing the same process from different positions within it. Schumpeter didn't romanticize capitalism. He didn't defend it morally. He respected its power and understood its cost. The mistake modern societies keep making is demanding stability from a system built on disruption, fairness from a process that reallocates value violently, and patience from populations whose economic foundations are repeatedly erased. Creative destruction offers no comfort. It offers clarity. Wealth is created by reallocation, not accumulation, and reallocation always produces winners and losers, often permanently. So the real question isn't ideological. It's personal. Are you positioned near the forces of creation or tethered to what? Being replaced? Are your skills portable or anchored to stability that no longer exists? Is your wealth exposed to disruption or protected by it? These are survival questions. Schumpeter didn't promise permanence. He warned against expecting it. Capitalism is not a machine you tune. It is a process you endure. And the societies that manage it best are not those that deny destruction, but those that build buffers against it. History doesn't repeat. Capitalism